John Charles Carter was born on October 4, 1923, in Cook County, Illinois, Tulila, née Baines, 1899–1994, and Russell Whitford Carter, 1897–1966, a sawmill operator. His autobiography states that he was born in Wilmette, Illinois, while most sources state that he was born in neighboring Evanston, Illinois. His birth certificate, registered when he was 11 days old, lists his name as Charlton Carter and says he was born in Evanston. Charlton Heston is an American actor and political activist. He gained fame for his leading male roles in numerous Hollywood films, including biblical epics, science fiction films, and action films. Charlton Heston passed away on April 5, 2008 at the age of 84 in Beverly Hills, California, USA. In 1971, he starred in the post-apocalyptic science fiction film The Omega Man, which received mixed reviews but was popular and became a cult film in the years following its release. It was also around this time that he became an advocate for gun rights. In 1972, Heston made his directorial debut starring as Mark Antony in an adaptation of the William Shakespeare play he had performed earlier in his stage career, Antony and Cleopatra. Hildegard Neal was Cleopatra and the English actor Eric Porter was Ahenobarbus. After receiving scathing reviews, the film was never released theatrically and is rarely seen on television. His next film Skyjacked, 1972, was a hit. However, The Call of the Wild, 1972, was a flop, one of Heston's least favorite films. He quickly rebounded with a string of memorable hits. Soylent Green, 1973, another dystopian sci-fi film that achieved cult status. The Three Musketeers, 1973, playing Cardinal Richelieu as part of an all-star ensemble cast. Two back-to-back disaster films, the hugely successful Earthquake, 1974, and Airport 1975, 1974, also a success, and Midway, 1976, a war film. Heston's long run at the box office ended with 2-Minute Warning, 1976, a suspense film, and The Last Heavy Men, 1976, a western. He played King Henry VIII in The Musketeers, The Prince and the Pauper, 1977, followed by the disaster film The Grey Lady Down, 1978. Heston starred in a western written by his son, The Mountain Men, 1980, and in a horror film, The Awakening, 1980. He made his second film as a director, Mother Lode, 1982, also from his son's script, and it was a commercial disappointment. From 1985 to 1987, he starred in his only stint on a primetime soap opera, The Colbys. With his son Fraser, he produced and starred in several TV movies, including remakes of Treasure Island and A Man for All Seasons. In 1992, Heston appeared on the cable network A&E in a short series of videos, Charlton Heston Introduces the Bible. reading passages from the King James Version. In 1993, Heston co-starred with John Anthony West and Robert M. Schoch in the Emmy Award-winning NBC special The Mystery of the Sphinx. West and Schoch proposed a much earlier date for the construction of the Great Sphinx than is generally accepted. They hypothesized that the basic type of weathering evident on the Great Sphinx and the enclosure walls of the enclosure walls could only have been caused by prolonged and heavy rainfall, and that the entire structure was carved out of a limestone base by an ancient advanced culture, such as the heavy Neolithic Karaun culture. Never taking himself too seriously, he also made several appearances as Chuck on the Dame Edna Everage shows, both on stage and on television. Heston appeared in 1993 in a cameo role in Wayne's World 2. In a scene in which Wayne Campbell, Mike Myers, asks for a better actor for a small role. After the scene is reshot with Heston, Campbell cries in awe. That year, Heston hosted Saturday Night Live. He had cameo roles in the films Hamlet, Tombstone, and True Lies. He appeared in many theater productions at the Los Angeles Music Center, where he appeared in Detective Story and the Caine Mutiny court-martial and as Sherlock Holmes in The Crucifier of Blood, opposite Richard Johnson as Dr. Watson. In 2001, he made a cameo appearance as an adult, dying chimpanzee in Tim Burton's remake of Planet of the Apes. His last film role was as Joseph Mengele in Ruhr Algheim 5555, My Father, which had a limited release, mainly for festivals, in 2003. Heston's distinctive voice landed him roles as a film narrator, including the opening scenes of Armageddon and Disney's Hercules. He played the title role in Mr. Roberts 3 times and cites it as one of his favorite roles. In the early 1990s, he tried unsuccessfully to revive and direct the show starring Tom Selleck. In 1998, Heston had a cameo role playing himself in the American television series Friends, in the episode, The One with Joey's Dirty Day. In 2000, he played Chief Justice Hayden Wainwright in the Outer Limits episode, Final Appeal. Richard Corliss wrote in Time magazine, "From start to finish, Heston was a grand, eerie anachronism, the wiry symbol of a time when Hollywood took itself seriously. When heroes came from history books, not comic books. Epics like Ben-Hur or El Cid simply cannot be made today, partly because popular culture has changed as much as political fashion. But mostly because there is no man like Charlton Heston to infuse form with his stature, fire and courage." In his obituary for the actor, film critic Roger Ebert noted, "Heston made at least 3 movies that almost everyone ends up seeing: Ben-Hur, The Ten Commandments, and Planet of the Apes." Heston's cinematic legacy was subject of Cinematic Atlas. The Triumphs of Charlton Heston, an 11-film retrospective by the Film Society of Lincoln Center that ran at the Walter Reed Theater from August 29 to September 4, 2008. On April 17, 2010, Heston was inducted into the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum's Hall of Great Western Performers. In his hometown of St. Helens, Michigan, a charter, independent school, Charlton Heston Academy, opened on September 4, 2012. It is housed in the former St. Helens Primary School. Enrollment on the first day was 220 students in kindergarten through 8th grade. Charlton Heston was featured on a United States postage stamp issued on April 11, 2014. Charlton Heston was inducted as a laureate of the Illinois Lincoln Academy and awarded the Order of Lincoln, the state's highest honor, by Illinois Governor James Thompson in 1977 in performing arts. Heston's political activism had 4 phases. In the first phase, 1955 to 1961, he supported liberal Democratic presidential candidates and signed petitions for liberal political causes. From 1961 to 1972, the second phase, he continued to support Democratic candidates for president. Moving beyond Hollywood, he became nationally visible in 1963 in support of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. From 1965 to 1971, he served as president-elect of the Screen Actors Guild and clashed with liberal rival Ed Asner. In 1968, he helped promote gun control measures when he joined Hollywood stars in support of the Gun Control Act of 1968. The third stage began in 1972. Heston rejected the liberalism of George McGovern and supported Republican Richard Nixon in 1972 for president. In 1980, he gave strong support to Ronald Reagan during his conservative presidency. In 1995, Heston entered his fourth stage, creating his own political action fundraising committee and meddling in the internal politics of the National Rifle Association. He gave numerous speeches and interviews about the culture wars, maintaining a conservative stance, blaming the media and academia for enforcing affirmative action, which he considered unfair reverse discrimination. Heston campaigned for presidential candidate Adlai Stevenson in 1956, although he was unable to campaign for John F. Kennedy in 1960 because he was filming El Cid in Spain. When a separate movie theater in Oklahoma screened his film El Cid for the first time in 1961. He reportedly joined a column outside the theater. Heston does not mention this incident in his autobiography, but he does describe a trip to Oklahoma City to picket segregated restaurants. Much to the chagrin of El Cid's producers, allied artists. During the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom held in Washington, D.C., in 1963, he accompanied Martin Luther King Jr. In later speeches, he said he helped the civil rights cause, long before Hollywood found it fashionable. In the 1964 election, he supported Lyndon Johnson, who led the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 through Congress over vocal opposition from Southern Democrats. That same year, Heston publicly opposed California's Proposition 14, which repealed the state's Rumford Fair Housing Act. In his 1995 autobiography, In the Arena, written after he became a conservative Republican, Heston wrote that while driving back from the set of Lord of War, he saw a Barry Goldwater for President billboard with the slogan "His, know in your heart he's right, campaign and think he's right." Heston later said that his support for Goldwater was the event that helped him oppose gun control laws. After the assassination of Senator Robert F. Kennedy in 1968, Heston, Gregory Peck, Kirk Douglas, and James Stewart issued a statement in support of President Johnson's Gun Control Act of 1968. The Johnson White House had requested Heston's support. He supported Hubert Humphrey in the 1968 presidential election. Heston opposed the Vietnam War during its course, although he changed his mind in the years after the war. And in 1969 he was asked by the Democratic Party to run for the United States Senate against incumbent President George Murphy. He agonized over the decision, but eventually decided he could never give up acting. He endorsed Richard Nixon in 1972, although Nixon is not mentioned in his autobiography. By the 1980s, Heston supported gun rights and changed his political affiliation from Democratic to Republican. When asked why he changed political alliances, Heston replied, "I haven't. The Democratic Party has changed." In 1987, he first registered as a Republican. He campaigned for Republicans and Republican presidents Ronald Reagan, George Herbert Walker Bush, and George Walker Bush. Heston resigned in protest from Actors' Equity, saying the union's refusal to allow a white actor to play a Eurasian role in Miss Saigon was obscenely racist. Heston charged that CNN's broadcasts from Baghdad had sowed doubt about the Allied effort in the 1990–1991 Persian Gulf War. At a Time Warner shareholder meeting, Heston criticized the company for releasing an Ice-T album that includes a song, "Cop Killer," about killing police officers. While filming The Savage, Heston was initiated by blood into the Minneconjou Lakota Nation, saying he had no natural Native American heritage, but chose to be Native American, to save the term from exclusively referring to American Indians. In Heston's 1997 speech called "Fighting the Culture War in America," Heston rhetorically denounced the culture war, which he believed was being waged by a generation of media people, educators, artists and politicians against it. He said, "The Constitution was handed down to be run by a bunch of wise old dead white guys who invented our country. Now some people wince when I say that. Why? It's true. They were white guys. As did most of the boys who died in the name of Lincoln, opposing slavery in 1860. Why should I be ashamed of the white boys? Hoods. Why the Million Man March on Washington was celebrated by many as progress while the Promise Keepers March was met with suspicion and derision. I'll tell you why. Culture war." In an address to students at Harvard Law School titled, "Winning the Culture War," Heston said, "If Americans believed in political correctness, we'd still be King George's boys, subjects bound to the British Crown. He told the students, "You are the best and the smartest. You, here in this fertile cradle of American academia. Here in the castle of learning on the Charles River. You are the cream. But I submit that you and your colleagues across the country are the most socially adjusted and politically silenced generation since Concord Bridge. And while you affirm and abide by it, you are, by the standards of your grandfathers, cowards." During a speech at Brandeis University, he declared, "Political correctness is a tyranny of manners." In a 1997 speech to the National Press Club, Heston said, "I doubt that any of you would prefer a rolled-up newspaper as a weapon against a dictator or a criminal intruder." Heston was president, a largely ceremonial position, and spokesman for the NRA from 1998 until he resigned in 2003. At the 2000 NRA convention, he raised a rifle above his head and declared that a possible Al Gore administration would take his Second Amendment rights from my cold, dead hands. In announcing his resignation in 2003, he once again raised a rifle above his head, repeating the 5 famous words from his 2000 speech. Heston was made an honorary life member. In the 2002 film Bowling for Columbine, Michael Moore interviewed Heston at Heston's home, asking him about an April 1999 meeting held by the NRA in Denver, Colorado, shortly after the Columbine High School massacre. Moore criticized Heston for the perceived thoughtlessness in the time and place of the meeting. When Moore asked Heston about his thoughts on why gun homicides are so much higher in the United States than in other countries, Heston said it was because, "we probably have a more mixed ethnic background," or that, "we have a history of violence, perhaps more than most countries." Afterwards, Heston apologized on camera and left. Moore was later criticized for conducting the interview in what some saw as an ambush. The interview was conducted in early 2001. Before Heston publicly announced his Alzheimer's diagnosis, but the film was released after, leading some to say that Moore should have cut the interview from the final film. In April 2003, he sent a message supporting U.S. forces in the Iraq War, attacking opponents of the war as pseudo-patriots. Heston opposed abortion and presented Bernard Nathanson's 1987 anti-abortion documentary, Eclipse of Reason, which focused on late-term abortions. Heston served on the advisory board of Accuracy in Media, a conservative media watchdog group founded by Reed Irvin. In March 1944, Heston married Northwestern University student Lydia Marie Clark at Grace Methodist Church in downtown Greensboro, North Carolina. Charlton Heston was an Episcopalian and was described as a spiritual man with a earthly sense, who respected religious traditions, and especially enjoyed the historical aspects of the Christian faith. In 1996, Heston had a hip replacement. He was diagnosed with prostate cancer in 1998. After a course of radiation therapy, the cancer went into remission. In 2000, he publicly disclosed the fact that he had been treated for alcoholism at a clinic in Utah in May to June of that year. On August 9, 2002, he publicly announced, via a recorded message, that he had been diagnosed with symptoms consistent with Alzheimer's disease. In July 2003, in his last public appearance, Heston received the Presidential Medal of Freedom at the White House from President George W. Bush. In March 2005, various newspapers reported that his family and friends were shocked by the progression of his disease and that he was sometimes unable to get out of bed. Charlton Heston died on the morning of April 5, 2008 at his home in Beverly Hills, California, with Lydia, his wife of 64 years, by his side. He was 84 years old. Also with Heston is their son Fraser Clark Heston and their daughter Holly Ann Heston. Heston's cause of death was not disclosed by his family. A month later, the media reported that his death was due to pneumonia. Early honors came from leading figures. President George W. Bush called Heston a man of character and integrity, with a big heart. He served his country during World War II, marched in the civil rights movement, led a labor union, and vigorously defended Americans' Second Amendment rights. Former First Lady Nancy Reagan said she was heartbroken by Heston's death and released a statement saying, "I will never forget Chuck as a character on the big screen in the roles he played, but more importantly, that I considered him a hero in life for the many times he stepped up to support Ronnie in everything he did." Heston's funeral was held a week later on April 12, 2008. In a ceremony attended by 250 people, including Nancy Reagan and Hollywood stars such as California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, Olivia de Havilland, Keith Carradine, Pat Boone, Tom Selleck. Oliver Stone, who had cast Heston in his 1999 film Any Given Sunday, Rob Reiner and Christian Bale. The funeral was held at St. Matthew's Episcopal Church in Pacific Palisades, the church where Heston had regularly worshipped and attended Sunday services since the early 1980s. He was cremated and his ashes were given to his family.